So several weeks ago, probably even a month ago, our people from central office, our nurse, maintenance and operations walked the school with each principal and designated the area for isolation, and the nurses area. And so what we're going to do is, as we begin to use these cameras, which are, I think, are pretty amazing, that we're able to do this. And so as they come in, what it does is it kind of highlights. So we'll actually probably have to have like a runner, like another person there. And then we'll be able to take that child immediately to the isolation or the nurses area. And then from there, and this is also what our plan says, the nurse will immediately, again, double check the fever, but also if there's any other symptoms, but we'll call the parents. We're trying to get this word out. We've had our plan posted for quite a long time, but that's the way we intend to do it. Right. Yeah. So we're trying to do all kinds of things. If we're talking about at the secondary level, even with the electives, some of the electives that the students would be taking, there's no way to do some of those virtually. But what actually at the secondary level that they have done, they have the high school, they have called all the parents, and they're in the midst of calling because there's a lot at both the secondaries. There's more than 500 students that are going to be staying home, probably about a third of each of those schools. So they've called, and what we're doing, which I think is a good feature, we're allowing choice there too. So if you wanted to come back in for a particular course, that's fine. We just need to know about it. Also, we're going to have to go online with some of these things. And while it might not be the typical, PE course as you would do if you were there or you're outside, it may be something like, so this is what you need to do. We need to complete, 10 push-ups, or going to do jumping jacks. You need to keep a log. And so we have to kind of adapt every single thing. Mm-hmm. There's going to be a number of them. The last time I checked, I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 7. It was a number of sites. When we did it in the summer, we tried to keep it. It was probably about 4 or 5. But we did keep it going all summer long, which I'm very proud of everybody for doing that. But it will be more sites. And, we're, as principals are calling, we're trying to get that information as well. Will you be coming for grab and go? And Megan is kind of reminding me that we just did a press release about food service. So I would ask you to go back and look at that as well. Yeah, I think it just went out. So hot off the press. So for starters, with the remote, we have about 3,000 already. And so whether you're in secondary or in elementary, you're going to actually have a teacher that, as they're going through for instance, at the elementary, as they're doing their lessons, they're finding that children maybe aren't getting it, then they're going to circle back around and do small group instruction. At the secondary level, whether it's 7, 8, or 9, or 10, 11, 12, the students will actually take a course through Edgenuity. But we do have our teachers assigned so that they know whether a student logged in. They'll be able to check and see how they're doing on the course. And then they too will circle back around and probably pull small groups. I can't say when, because everybody's got to get started with their schedules and all that, but they will be circling back around to do small group instruction. So that's what I mean by tutoring. Now, in the brick and mortar school, we are also providing additional tutors in person, because we are trying to look at things and see if we can't pick up with some of that lost time. Now, whether we're talking, and I'm probably answering too much, so just give me the sign or something, whether we're doing virtual or we're doing in school, we're also looking at class sizes to try to make sure that the class sizes, whether virtual or in person are not too high. In some schools, we have 12, 13. In some classes, we have 9 or 10. I mean, it's not unmanageable. And we've worked really hard on these schedules with the information that we have right now. Of course, when the day comes and we find out who comes and who doesn't, we may have to review and reschedule. But for right now, I think that's another way that you ensure that you're paying attention to students. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if they're in the school, the principal also, each one wrote their plan. Many of them have like one-way hallways. They're also, of course, if they're going in lines and they have younger children, I'm sure you've seen that before, where they kind of put their arms out and they kind of distance between each other. So once they get inside of the school, that's really picks up with, as we asked each principal to do a school plan. And even things like in the cafeteria, if there are only a few classes that are going in, we have a proportion of students where, just like if you were in a restaurant, you can only have so many. So I think we're down to like 25%, but most of them will be eating lunch in their classroom. Yes. Yeah, it's not going to be hard. I mean, we're going to do adults, so that would be teachers and staff, and we're going to do students. And then we're going to tell you, what the confirmed cases were. So obviously, if you had gotten a coronavirus test, we don't know that really. I mean, we're not allowed to ask for any of that information. But our teachers and our staff, of course, they've been great about calling in saying, hey, I've been diagnosed. So if it's confirmed, it'll say confirmed. If it's you were in close contact, for instance, we all know the football team had a couple of, students, and then it wasn't just the students that got it, but then we had to look at the rest of the group. So that would come under the heading of, if you will, kind of close contact. So we will list it out. It'll be very, obvious. And then we're just going to keep up with it. And like every week or so, and I think that should come out tomorrow for the first time. Okay. No, not for the students. Now, I have been asked by some of the teachers if they might wear scrubs. And I think that's happening in surrounding systems, because I think they're thinking, well, when I get home, I'll be able to just throw those in the washing machine and hot water and kind of that sort of thing. And so I have somewhat relaxed in terms of, school staff, if the principal, that's what they want to do. As far as students, I think we're pretty on track to keep doing what we've been doing. Now, I'm not planning on monitoring what a virtual child is doing, but we are putting out to the families. Of course, most of it is common sense. You want to have your child be in a place that is an obvious common area, whether it be a dining room or a kitchen, an office. And then, of course, you want to make sure that they're not maybe, wearing their pajamas or something like that. Because remember, if the teacher is doing Zoom, all those kids, the elementary kids, will be on there, and so you want to be careful of privacy issues. So I would just remind parents that, and adults, sometimes adults forget, they're in their home, but we have to be careful for just the decorum of being in a meeting. Yes, this is definitely in all my years, which have been many, very, very hard, because you really, there's been so much advice and there's been so much said. First it was don't wear a mask, and then it's wear a mask, and just back and forth, can it stay on surfaces? No, then, well, maybe for so many hours. There's just been so much conflicting information. Everybody is doing their best to help certainly by providing the toolkit and the different kinds of things. I'm a doctor in education. I'm not a medical doctor. And so, I'm going to be making calls with the nurse, with the principal, or with the football coach, trying to get a handle on what exactly happened, who was involved. And I know that it's kind of a no-win situation. No matter what you do, there will be people that think you made the right call and people that are mad at you. And so this is hard for anybody to plan for because it's never been seen before, because we're dealing also with our adults and trying to keep them as safe as possible. And of course, the children. And again, even with children, there's been conflicting information. Also, I'll just add this and then I'll be quiet because I know you only have so much time. But we're educators again. And so while we can, tell somebody to go home or say, if you have symptoms, stay home, we can't control the environment 24/7. So I also can't make people get a test. I can't ask for results. So we all have to work together. Parents, with the school system, we have to work together for the good of all. And so if you know that your child isn't feeling well, even though you may not think they have coronavirus, please keep them at home. I would say the same again, and I have said it multiple times to staff. If you have a question, if you're concerned, stay home. We also, as a school system, we have made opportunities for our staff to go and get a test. Again, they don't have to give it to us, but for peace of mind, it's available and it's free to them. So we're going to do that once a month all the way through November. But yes, this is one of the hardest things. Thank you so much. And it is nice to meet you.
All right. Well, thank you, Nathaniel. So next we have WTBY. So, Stephen, I forgot your name. I'm sorry, Stephen, don't.
Come on, Megan.
You realize that I have so much on my mind. I'm sorry.
I understand.
So, Stephen, whenever you're ready, you can cut on your camera and unmute yourself.
I am unmuted. I'll turn on the camera.
We want to see your face. Thank you.
There he is.
Okay.
Hey, Aaron.
Yes, Aaron just popped in. Aaron doesn't know this. She kind of knows this, but she's just gotten a pretty neat experience next week. She's going over to Louisiana to help one of our stations over there cover hurricane coverage for the week.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
So she came in to get all the details on that.
So
Pretty exciting.
I won't be here for the first day, Megan.
Oh, no.
Now I'm having to reshift everything. So
You still be somebody good now.
I promise we will.
Say they're all good.
Okay.
I'll start with my first question. Obviously,
Okay.
it's one that we've talked about a little bit, but the ADPH toolkit, it's gotten mixed reviews across
Right.
the state. What's your thoughts on that toolkit?
So, I'm grateful for any assistance. We all are. Certainly, we were all planning and working pretty early on. I mean, our plan, we worked on probably at least a few weeks before we got the first, toolkit. So that being said, I think, there was a little bit of a disconnect there. Again, appreciate all the help. And then another one came out. Now, the only other thing I would say is I am an educator. Again, I'm not a medical person. I'm not a doctor, but I also know how education works. And so sometimes when you read scenarios and you see, if there's a child in the front that isn't wearing a mask, but there's a child way in the back that is wearing a mask, and, to provide seating charts for every single classroom, which we are going to do, seating charts for buses. But we have to remember that we're dealing with children, or we're dealing with teenagers, or we're dealing with adolescents that, they're not coming into a classroom and staying put. We don't like tie them to their chairs or anything. So it's one thing to have a seating chart. It's quite another thing to be in a classroom and be fluid. And so I think that would be my only, one of my only issues is really more about that. And then also the whole fact of this is guidance. We all know it's guidance. It's not, you don't have to take it verbatim. So it does come back on the superintendents to make the call, which I have no problem with. But, I just want to be clear then that when we call, if we're getting assistance or we're getting input, we're going to try to incorporate that. But that doesn't mean that's it. And so I guess I'm just a very practical person, and that was some of the criticism that I had. But I can't be critical of any of the rest of it. Again, not a doctor. We will follow the guidelines.
And I understand. I have a wife that teaches first grade. I have a third grade student that's in this cross between going to daycare 3 days a week and going to school 2 days. So I understand completely.
I know it's very hard for everybody. And, that was my main thing that I said early on in our virtual conversations with whomever was listening. Social distancing, everybody wants to ensure that there's social distancing. I mean, we will do the very best we can, but remember, schools were not made, for a hospital-like setting. They were made for children to be together and to socialize. So that's part of the issue.
My next question, we saw last week Houston County Schools came out that they were having trouble getting their Chromebooks. Are you guys seeing similar problem getting Chromebooks, computers, things of that nature?
We ordered a long time ago. We were told that they would be here, in time. And then I pushed things back about 3 weeks. So yes, Chromebooks have been, I don't know what's going on, but I don't know that there's a system that have actually had things delivered to them in a timely manner. Now, what we did was we went back into the schools, assuming that, there would be a number of students that would be virtual. And so we took what we had, existing, but still left, of course, for the students that will be in brick and mortar. But we gathered what we had, and then we distributed those. Then the other thing was we had ordered Chromebooks that had like the hotspot built in it. So then we had to go and figure out what to do next because we could get the Chromebooks, but we didn't have a hotspot. So we got hotspots. And we worked that with the computer company that really didn't deliver on time. We said, what can you do for us? Because we ordered a long, long time ago. So that's how we're dealing with it. Now, we're ready to distribute. In fact, some of the schools probably have already done that. And as we had the virtual signups, I would say 99% of the principals have already called their parents to see, did you need a device? Do you need a hotspot? Now, what we're trying to get through to people is if you have 3 or 4 children, you only need one, of course, one hotspot. And so, we'll be giving all those out. Now, sometime in mid-September when the actual other Chromebooks come in, or maybe a little later, we're going to have to do some sort of a swap so that we can get the right ones in their hands. But for now, that's how we managed it.
The next one is a little bit of a hot button question statewide. We've seen fans not social distancing, not wearing their mask at games, et cetera. We've also seen it on the sidelines with teams not following the rules that have been put in place. We asked Dr. Harris earlier today on a call with Doug Jones the same question of who is supposed to enforce this. And I know Dothan has not had the first game yet. This Friday will be that. You'll be faced with this issue as well. He kind of put the blame or the responsibility, I should say, back on local police departments and local school systems, of course. But are those things you all are talking about, trying to address now before this first game, and how are y'all going to try to handle it?
I mean, so we have our athletic director, I believe, has put out a communication, but of course, it all comes down to, as people come in, of course, we'll have our people there as we normally do in terms of administrators. We'll have the police presence, and we will, as I say, get the word out early. Now, I expect that as far as the teams are concerned, that Coach Greider will do, has been doing his part with the students as they've been practicing and that kind of thing. And so I would expect that they're the ones that are going to monitor their team, that the other side will monitor their team. Also, the city has response, and I'm not pointing fingers because everybody's doing their very best. The city has responsibility for the stadium. They have told us how many we can have. I think it's something like 2,500. All our tickets will be bought online. We're trying to do things so that certainly if the band is there, then the band parents will be able to come, football parents will be able to come. So there will be social distancing, at the site per city. But what happens when somebody doesn't? I mean, honestly, what can you do? You're going to go up and say, please put your mask on, or can you, if you're not a family, could you move away from each other? Beyond that, I'm imagining that it would have to come down to, asking one of the officers to get involved, because, we don't have any ability to. I mean, the governor's made the mask order. That should be good enough for everybody. But I imagine if it comes right down to it, that's where it would be. Just like if there was any other issue at the stadium, we would normally do our administrative people, but we would work with the police.
During this week's school board meeting, you mentioned that you were trying to hire several virtual teaching positions. So far, it appeared that only about half of those positions had been filled, and then you even had one to back out on you. How difficult is it right now to find teachers and even nurses for several of these positions that you've got?
It's very difficult to find teachers. It's been difficult. It's been difficult to find exceptional ed teachers. I mean, that's been for a while, even before the pandemic, but definitely hard. We are looking at all kinds of different ways, and we believe we have enough. I mean, we were trying to really have enough to be comfortable. And part of the problem is that even with trying to put two, for instance, this is not really a question, but I'm trying to put two substitutes, full-time substitutes in each building, because we won't know until maybe the day of school if a teacher calls out or something happens. So that's kind of a fail-safe. But in terms of the world of virtual, we're looking to see if we can find people who are retired. We're looking if there's any, for instance, students that are in the world of education, maybe they're seniors about to graduate, but they are going virtual too. Like, I would love to get, some of those folks that are just getting ready to enter the world of education. So we're trying to be as creative as possible, but yes, it's very difficult to find teachers.
As we know, there's so many unknowns going into the school year, but what are some concerns you have at this point as y'all get ready to start next week?
Well, I think that goes back to the last one. I mean, the adults, if you don't have enough adults that you can safely cover, your students and keep school going, that this could be a huge impact. And not knowing, no one knows, we've got Labor Day coming up, or there was this event or that event in somebody's life, and people come down with it. And, then we're looking at a 2-week, away. And so what we've come to is, if you don't have symptoms and you're not really sick, is there a way we can shift that particular person to virtual, and they kind of take their class along with them? And we're going to have to be ready. So that's another big concern. We're going to have to be ready to shift kind of on a dime. So while we've had many, many teachers in training for virtual education, we have to talk to all of our teachers about being ready to move and shift if in fact something happens. So I say, that's probably my biggest concern, is the coverage. And of course, obviously the children. I mean, again, there's been so much competing information, that research and whatnot, that, you just don't know. And make the best call we can.
Since school started back for many systems, has Dr. Mackey or even the ADPH issued any revised guidance to you all based on what they're seeing so far?
We do get regular updates from Dr. Mackey, and of course I read them, and I haven't seen anything too major come through. Also, the Athletic Association has changed some things, since they first issued their guidance. They went more towards the 6 feet, 15 minutes. I'm not an athlete, but when I think about, kids being in a football scrimmage or something like that, seems to me they're right in each other's faces. And I don't know how you get there and go, well, they weren't there for 15 minutes, but that was their guidance. So we're going to try to take every single thing on a case-by-case basis. That's what we've done so far.
A couple more. I'm going back to
No
the
problem.
original ones that we had. There are many kids or many parents concerned that their children have fallen behind or could fall behind even further. What suggestions do you have for them?
Well, I think one of the suggestions, whether they're doing virtual or they're doing in school, is to make sure they're staying in close contact with their teachers. And we, as I say, we have hired and are hiring tutors so that we can do our part during the course of the day. But I think what's going to have to happen, and we'll work on that next after we get school open, is that in fact, we may try to offer not a summer school program. I don't want to wait that long. But as we get into the first couple of weeks and we try to measure with our new test, because we have a new test, as we measure where students are, I'd like for us to devise a way where we can do, some sort of during the week after school kind of catch-up program. And even if we need to do that virtually, I think we need to do that. I don't want to go a whole year or even a half of a year and not be able to address issues that, probably we would have caught had they been with us.
How's that test going to work?
It's an online test, and it's programmed so that if you go on and you do really well, let's say you're, I don't know, a seventh grader, and you're just, boy, you're hitting everyone, it will immediately pull you to the next level. So it's always going to be upping the ante and challenging. And I think what it does, and I've seen it because I've seen it used in other, it's called the measurement of academic progress. It's called MAP. But I've seen it in my other system, and what it gives to teachers in terms of detail on each student is so extensive that it really does provide a game plan or, a way forward for what we need to teach or reteach.
How is the school system going to handle big events? For example, homecoming, school dances, pep rallies, and I'll go ahead and lump this in for younger kids this time of year. Fall field trips are big things. How are you looking at that right now?
Very cautiously. I mean, I would say it's going to be a similar situation each time to what we did with graduation. So at first we were going to do, okay, we'll come in 10 at a time. And then, we said, well, something else happened. I don't know if it was the threat level. Then we ended up doing, drive-through situation. And then as we got closer, we figured out how to offer something that was more palatable to the parents and the graduates. So I think it's going to be a make the decision as those things come up. For instance, open houses. I guess that's a good, normally open houses are people come in, they meet the teacher, they go to the classroom, they spend time in there. Well, we're not going to have like a lot of different people walking through the hallways. So some of the schools are doing things that are outside, almost like a tailgating thing, but not with anything that we shouldn't do. And some are doing virtual. Some are breaking it up to the point where very, very small groups, even things like when you have a kindergarten child, you want to walk your child to the classroom. Even that is a struggle. So we, in early childhood and kindergarten, we tried to rethink how we could do that and allow parents to have some sense of comfort, but at the same time, not have lots of adults in the building. So as far as field trips, I think for the first 9 weeks, that's probably not going to happen. Bigger events, pep rallies, I would suggest, you need to do it with very, very small groups of students. Maybe it's one class, maybe it's the seniors, and that may have to be divided up by group.
We've had some parents that have reached out to us about special needs students, and they feel like that it's harder on them than the average student. What efforts are being made to assist in this area as they go back to school?
So from what I'm understanding, our exceptional ed director and several of their staff have been contacting parents, talking to them. Anything that is in the IEP, we will do, must be delivered. Now, of course, just like as I was saying earlier with physical education, if you're usually have the child in front of you and you're doing something with the child physically, that's going to be different. But we are still going to provide whatever services need to be provided for our exceptional ed children. And it's going to be even more important for us to stay on top of that and be careful and make sure that, we're meeting their needs. Now, a lot of our children that are medically fragile are going to come to school. So there's all different, levels of how parents feel and what they want to do.
Last question. What is Dothan City Schools' worst case scenario for having to shut down school completely again?
That's probably it, having to shut down school completely. I can envision that it could be, a grade. Now, when you get into secondary, because you have students that start out in one class, but then go to multiple classrooms, that could affect multiple sites, multiple instructional sites. So that would be my biggest concern, is that we have to shut the system. If we have to shut the system, as I was saying earlier, we have to be ready to shift and to move very quickly. That means that instead of having 3,000 virtual, we have almost 9,000 that are virtual. So we go back again to the whole issue about Chromebooks, hotspots. We have asked people and we have counted them out, and we have enough to do what we know is the case right now. If everything shuts down and we have folks that don't have anything, then we're going to have to be ready to figure that out in a short notice. So that's a pretty big fear.
Is there a percentage level that you're looking at? If 25% of the student population gets it, we've got to shut the doors for a week and clean and all that?
No, I haven't. That's a very good question. No, I haven't seen anything in terms of guidance. I just think if it's impacting almost an entire school, or if it's like when you get a terrible flu season, and I know this is worse than the flu, but there have been systems that shut down completely because we already have our plans in place for cleaning and disinfecting, but that would even be more so. Now, other than shutting down, it would be the return back in. So one of the items that I proposed was, and I know parents don't like this, but your child would come to school 2 days a week, and then the other half of the school body would come the other 2 days, and then on one day we would clean. And so we might have to switch and implement something that difficult. And that would be difficult for everyone.
Thank you so much for answering all these.
Thank you so much for allowing me to. I appreciate it.
Sorry about that. I was having technical issues. My mouse went dead.
You too, huh?
My mouse went dead in the middle of the press conference. Okay, Sable, you are next, ma'am. Sable, are you there?
Hey, I'm here. I'm gonna have to ask my questions through chat because my son just got.
Aww. Poor baby.
1 second.
What's wrong?
He's just got a bad cold. I've got it too now.
Oh.
That's okay.
No.
Good chat.
Poor little guy.
Okay. So she's going to ask her questions in the chat. And I also have them too, Sable, if I need to ask them. So okay, all right. So her question is, there have been delays in shipping from computer companies and cleaning supply companies. Does Dothan have all of the technology and equipment it needs for students to be successful this year?
So we too have experienced this issue. As I was saying to someone else that asked me the question, we just adapted in terms of our computers. We do have on order, and they should come in mid-September, but that's not good enough. But we do have our Chromebooks, probably almost $1 million worth of Chromebooks that were ordered that have the internal hotspot in it. So we didn't get those in time. So we used what we had in terms of in the schools, and we are able to provide computers and hotspots to those that said that they need them. Because we delayed a couple extra weeks, I believe we now have received almost all of the cleaning supplies, the equipment and the technology for the sanitary purposes. We may be waiting on one or two things, but for the most part, we've got almost everything that we said we were going to have in place. In addition, as you know, we are going to go ahead and get those thermal imaging and the thermal imaging equipment, and that will take us a little while to install. So that will probably be ready the very first day, but I'm excited about that. I think that's something that's really going to be helpful to our schools. But for the most part, you know, we're in good shape.
Okay. I think he'll be okay for a few minutes. Let's see. I know you discussed at your Monday board meeting that you had over 250 teachers that were trained to be virtual teachers. How many of these will actually be virtual teachers, and are they going to be compensated differently than teachers who teach in person?
So there won't be a different, you know, pay grade for teachers that choose to be virtual versus brick and mortar. They're not going to be compensated differently. As far as the 250, we have been training many more teachers than those that are just slated to be virtual. And at this point, because we're being so careful about our schedules, we're moving teachers back and forth right now between, you know, brick and mortar and virtual. That doesn't mean that they're doing both. It just means right now we're still planning. So in some cases, there's a virtual teacher who might actually be picking up a piece of a second grade over here and maybe a piece of a second grade, you know, in another location, so that they have caseloads. So the exact number of teachers right now that are virtual, I don't have that exact number, but I'll be happy to get it to you through Megan, but probably give me till another day or so to do so, because as I say, they're still shifting. The 250 was the number in terms of so far how many we've gotten trained. That means that even teachers that have been in regular ed have had that training. Because as I was explaining, you just don't know with this thing, you know, when in fact you might have to go from being a brick and mortar teacher to a virtual teacher.
I know you touched on PE a little bit, how that would be different for virtual students and in-person students. What about during playtime or recess? Will students be able to play on the playground or have?
Yeah, as I was mentioning before, I think we all have to remember that schools are not hospitals. You know, we will clean playground equipment. There have been all kinds of different reports, but there have been many reports that have said that, you know, if you're outside, you know, it's far better than being inside. So, you know, we feel that the students, if they're coming to school, you know, we want to make it as normal as possible. I think whenever we can find a way to have our children get outside in the fresh air, you know, we need to do that. And of course, you know, we need to be vigilant about cleaning. But again, we're dealing with children. We're dealing with little people. You know, we're dealing with adolescents. These children are going to connect with one another, you know, one way or another. So I don't think that anybody wants to have school be a place where, you know, you come in, you sit in your desk and you do not leave that desk, you know, for the 5 hours. That would just be terrible. I think our children have been, you know, through enough. So I'm all for them taking breaks, getting outside, getting in the fresh air, maybe eating outside. We've put in couple of outside eating areas, certainly at the 2 secondary schools. But if you're a teacher and you can take your group outside and sit out in the front of the building and read a story together, then I think that would be great.
And going back to virtual classes, how will tests be done? Are those going to have to be done in person, or is there a way to do that virtually as well?
Well, I don't think we've gotten there yet, but you know, as we do, that would more than likely be one of those things where, you know, the teacher at the elementary level is teaching for a certain period of time. Then there's going to be a period of time where the child will be doing, you know, their work. And within that period of time, they also would perhaps be taking a test, you know, and then we have to decide through each teacher, we'll have to have a system for how they're going to manage that and how there would be grading. Now, one exciting thing that I think we have going on for us that will be helpful is we have actually hired 2 virtual coordinators. So one is for the elementary, and that person is going to be helping those elementary teachers. And then there's another one for the secondary. Now, in the secondary, the children are taking courses online. So there are assessments that are built in. Also, there will be opportunities for the parents when they pick up, you know, their equipment. You know, what we're going to have to do is also manage to get out materials that the students will need to have at home. And so this is going to require a lot of planning in terms of like thinking about, oh, what are the first 2 weeks? What are the needs within the first 2 weeks? And if as an elementary teacher, a lot of assessment comes through observation. And so you're going to be quite aware of the children that you have online going through maybe a reading assignment and that sort of thing. That's going to be obvious to you, but there's also going to be a time when they come back around and do, as I say, you know, their small groups or their time where they may be tutoring for skills.
I believe this is my last question, but for pickups and drop-offs, I don't know if this was mentioned in the reopening plan or not. I don't remember. How will that be done? I know a lot of the times they're typically grouped together in the gym or sometimes in the hallways at the beginning and at the end of school before being.
Yeah, we're gonna. So each school wrote their own plan as far as how these things were going to take place, but clearly one of the guiding principles would be that you're not going to have children congregating in a big space. That's why we redid our lunches so that our cafeterias would not be, you know, full for the first 9 weeks. You know, I doubt that the media center will be used in the same way. In hallways, they'll be moving in one way or another, and some even have the footprint spacing that they put down. As far as drop off and pickup, you know, we're trying to get to parents. Remember, each of the buildings, many of the buildings are down substantially as far as students actually coming to the school. So that's gonna be a big help for the first 9 weeks, because really that's providing a lot of extra room or space. And at each of the secondary levels, there are about, and I want to say 500 to 600 students that are not going to be coming. So if you think about those buildings, think about the fact that 1/3 of the population will not be there. And at many of the elementaries, as I say, we're looking at 10, 12, 13 actually in a class. So it should present a much more manageable situation. The part that might be hard, and we're trying to work this out by doing some advanced kinds of things, as I was saying before, would be your younger children, you know, your early childhood, your kindergarten, you know, making sure that they're not they're not scared. They're going to want to they're going to want to walk with a parent. And so we've got to figure out how to do that kind of distancing, and that's going to happen really before they get to school. We're going to acclimate them as best we can. But that would be an area where I think that it might be a little bit more difficult.
Last question. How are y'all handling open houses?
Sure. So some are doing virtual open houses. I've seen some really creative things. Some are doing where they're inviting portions of grades to come at certain times. Some are having outdoor kind of, I want to say like a tailgating thing, where the teacher's out there with their car and they're by their car. Some are actually doing like drive-in, drive-through. They're all doing different kinds of things, but certainly it's not going to be the way it was. I think that in this past week, Scott Falk has done a number of, parent get-togethers, but they've been quite small or smaller in nature. It's not that you would have all 600 in a grade coming at one time. So we just have to think differently. We're trying to make sure that we're doing the things that we normally do, but they don't look the same.
Those are all the questions I had. Thank you so much for answering them.
Sure, no problem.
Great. And I had one more question from WTVY. Erin just texted me.
Okay.
This is about our thermal imaging cameras because everyone is really excited about that. And her question was, will they be used? Oh, let me reword that. Sorry. Will they be used, or if they can be moved to football stadiums or gyms for use there, or just within the school?
No, these will be for the school. They have to be mounted. So no, they can't. They're not portable. They're not going to be able to be moved from one place to another place. We are getting 4 for the 2 bigger schools and 1 for each of the other schools, but they will stay in place.
All right. Well, that was all the questions. Any other questions, guys?
Happy to answer.
Anything? Last call.
Anything at all?
All right, guys. Well, what I'm going to do is, if you don't mind, I'm going to kick you guys out of this meeting. So I'm going to put everybody in the waiting room. So thank you guys so much.
Thanks for the opportunity.